if I don't promote myself, no one else is. So I make a point to make sure people understand that I'm out there. I'm doing things. I don't feel like I don't want to share what I'm up to. I think for me, the topic that's been the most surprise has probably been menopause. And I've been really fascinated by how many companies are interested in that topic. And
Yeah.
I think it's just become kind of a hot topic. Sometimes I think it can be very easy to overwhelm the other person
Yeah.
who is getting your email or getting your phone call. And I think making sure the messaging is very clear. Like one thing I would do a lot in the beginning was, send like my one sheet. And I think it might have been overwhelming. It's so easy not to follow up with networking. It's so easy to go to a networking event, you go home and you say, who did I just meet? So I never like to do that. Like I want to make sure I actually am able to follow up.
That was just a taste of the practical wisdom Cynthia Conigliaro brings to the table. In this conversation, we get into how she built her business from scratch with no clients and no content, how she turned LinkedIn into her most powerful growth engine, and the networking philosophy that changed everything, including a mindset shift that most solopreneurs get completely backwards. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil. My next guest is a country music loving, guitar playing solopreneur who helps burned out humans feel like humans again. And she built her business by leading with one question: how can I help? Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation. Now, you said to me you were surrounded by entrepreneurship at home, right? Your husband's been doing it for, I think, 36 years, and your son's got the same business drive heading to BC. And you even said you feel like you were made to be an entrepreneur. But still, for a long time, you stayed in the corporate world while keeping some side hustles running. So talk to us a little bit about what that tug of war was like in your head before you finally went in full-time 3 years ago.
Yeah, great question. I think making that leap to being an entrepreneur can be a little bit scary. I know for me, it felt kind of very uncertain. It felt much safer, to work for the big companies that I was working for so many years. At the same time, I always really had a goal and an interest in just kind of going out on my own. And I finally kind of just got the courage to move forward and go for it. And I'm really happy I did.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about is like side hustles are often training wheels, right? And I think it's a great
So
way to sort of dip your toe, even if it's just to sort of figure out what's working, what's not, what you're passionate about, sort of, understanding the intersection, as they call when in Ikigai, it's sort of like a similar thing, right? Your passion, income,
Yep.
and demand. So
Yeah, exactly. Why you wake up in the morning, right?
yeah. So now you also had a music business,
I
and
did.
you were coaching on the side.
I
And you
was.
still
Yeah.
had a full-time corporate gig, right? Running all of it was running at the same time. Now,
I did.
most people would call that impressive, but I'm guessing inside it felt a little less like juggling and more like something else. So, what was actually going on for you during that time before you finally decided to go all in on your wellness business?
Yeah. I think it was a kind of situation where I, decided to kind of pursue one of my passions, which, as you know, is music. I also have always loved kind of promotion and PR and that aspect of things. So I kind of combined my love for music and PR, marketing, promotion by creating my own music PR business.
Right.
So it was a way to kind of combine a lot of what I'm interested in at the same time, if that makes sense. It was completely out of the wellness, kind of field that I had been in for so many years. So that was, I think, kind of a nice kind of break for me in a sense to really step out of the field just for a little while. I think I needed that time to just kind of do something completely different. So,
Uh, yeah. Were you testing it as a business idea also, or was it just a release valve as you sort of described it?
yeah, I was. I mean, I had worked for another company for a short time that did what I was doing, which was basically promoting musicians, music PR. for artists all over the country. And I decided I wanted to do it on my own, which is actually really similar to what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
in that I worked for a company that does a little bit of what I'm doing now, but decided to kind of just branch out on my own and, kind of do some different twists, kind of change up a little bit, add on and alter, and then just kind of create my own. So I think that's kind of been what I've done is I've learned from others, and I've tried to gather what I can from different people and different situations, industries, positions, jobs, and just kind of create my own thing.
Yeah. Again, it's great learning, right? So I wonder, while you were doing those things, did you sort of have the blueprint already to say you had a fixed amount of time, you were going to sort of test this while you were coaching, that you decided to make the leap, or did that decision happen organically through that process and you'd always plan to stay in corporate?
Yeah, I was hoping to go off on my own. That really was my goal. But I do think that what happened to me with the music business, unfortunately, was COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so when COVID hit, it really was not a good situation for the business because the entire business was based on live music.
Right.
And if you remember at the start of the pandemic, live music just went away.
Sure.
Everything went away, right? Like
Yeah.
people are not going to go hear musicians perform. So that was one of the issues I had with that business. I just decided after several months it was time to maybe just close the door. And it was a tough decision because I really did love what I was doing. Having said that, it was a very demanding kind of a business because it was a very like around the clock kind of a thing. And I think that maybe if I had started that business now, maybe it would have been a little bit different in terms of some of the choices I made. Who knows? But of course, we learn along the way.
Yeah.
Like I created the business I have now, a couple of years ago, and I've learned so much through that I think looking back, there's probably some things I could have done differently.
Well, we all could.
Hindsight 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, evolution is part of this journey, right? I always say
So
the way what
true.
your business looks like 6 months from now will be very different from what it looks like 6 months from then, right? And it will
Yes.
continually evolve
It's
as
so true. It's so true. One thing I've learned, Nikhil, is just how important it is to have kind of like other people to collaborate with. Like
yeah.
I didn't really do that much with that business. I was kind of like on my own. Whereas the situation I'm in now, I really have many, many partnerships. I have a lot of situations where I'm collaborating. I have a huge network. And that has, I think, really helped my business to grow very rapidly.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, and I'm going to get into that a little more deeply in terms of how you've built out that network. But I think there's another valuable lesson here, right? Like you said, I don't think to me the definition of failure is not shutting something down. That's recognizing the reality and moving to the next thing, right? You've still learned
Mm.
for the
That's
next
a
thing.
great point.
We never talk about that enough. I think that's part of the problem. Failure to me is the only thing that I define as failure is walking away, learning nothing, right?
I love that. It's
That's the
so
only
true.
definition.
It's such a good point. Such a
Yeah.
good point.
So anyway, I think that there's a valuable lesson there. Now, you also told me something interesting, that getting into companies is hard, right? And we'll sort of get into this a little more also, and that a lot of wellness coaches who want to do what you're doing struggle to sort of crack that door. So can you take us back to the early days of WorkWell webinars and tell us what was the first 90 days? What did that look like? And I'm asking you for the unglamorous, non-social media version, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. So when I first started my business, it was a lot of work for me, meaning I had to create the content because
Yeah.
my business is basically content driven.
Right.
My product is webinars.
Yes.
That's my product. Some in-person presentations, but primarily webinars, right? So I had to create those webinars. I didn't have those created. So that was a lot of time. It was a lot of work for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I spent the first 6 months or so of my business is creating that content. And since then, I continually tweak, I continually add on. I'm continually adding skills like myself. For instance, I just became certified in the blue zones. I just became certified as a menopause coach. So I'm continually kind of adding more information. So I become more knowledgeable about all of these topics, a range of topics. But it took me a long time to develop all of that content.
Right. And then you can you talk a little bit about how you sort of started getting it out there in the early days?
It was just a lot of self-promotion. In my opinion, LinkedIn is just I love LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I absolutely love LinkedIn. I probably could work for LinkedIn and as a marketer and talk about what an amazing platform it is because I have been able to really build my brand, meet so many people on LinkedIn, and it's just opened so many doors. So I would say the social media platform of LinkedIn helped me a lot. I also spent a lot of time just attending in-person networking events, attending virtual networking events, so much, which is so much time. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Having said that, I do think it's very, very important. And I think that was a strategy that helped me a lot.
Yeah, and there was grind there, right? From what I'm hearing, you
Oh,
first
yeah.
creating all of that content. 6 months is a long time to create content. Then sort of
Mhm.
getting in front of people and doing the networking. And we'll get into your strategy of networking in a minute because I think there's value there for
Yeah.
solopreneurs listening. But I think that's again a piece people gloss over, right? Because as you said, a lot of people come to you and say, "Hey, I want to do what you're doing," but they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
understand the hard work that first goes into.
Exactly. Exactly. It's
You
so
didn't wave
true.
a magic wand. Yeah,
Exactly. It's so true. And, the thing is, I do spend a long time kind of in conversations with people on LinkedIn primarily. Sometimes it's on the phone, whatever it is. But I reach out to people or they reach out to me. And I really make a conscious effort to make sure that I'm learning about the other person.
yeah,
Because the person on the other line or on the Zoom call wants to learn about me, but they also want to talk about them.
sure.
And what I find with networking, if you can really listen to the other person and determine what it is the other person is doing and how you can actually help them, I have found in more times than not, it comes back to help me.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
really try to make a habit of listening. So, how can I help this person? And I'll say to them, you know what? It just happened to me a couple hours ago. I was talking to someone and I said, you know what? I know someone who I think would be really good for you to talk with. The 2 of you are in the same line of work. You have so much in common. Why not connect the 2 of you on LinkedIn? I'll just start a group chat, and you guys can meet and talk and decide how you wanna move forward, and she was thrilled.
Yeah.
And, as a result, she's asking me a number of things about, being in one of her events and X, Y, and Z. So I think trying hard not to make it all about yourself when you're in the middle of networking is super, super helpful.
Yeah, and I think you might have jumped ahead to one of my questions, but I want to come back
Oh,
and touch on that, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But I do want to break that down a little more if there's more detail there, because I think that's an extremely important skill that most people misunderstand. They think of
yes, no
networking as
question.
pitching yourself,
No
and
question.
selling your wares. So I think there's, more detail we'll get into. But I want to shift
100%.
gears a little bit before that and talk a
Yeah.
little bit about brand building. Now, you said something interesting. You just got certified in blue zones. Menopause is another thing. So I'm curious in terms of you seem to have a really interesting range, right? Organizational
Mm,
culture, leadership, burnout, menopause, mindset shifts. So is there a
yeah.
thread that connects them all, or is variety the point of the offering?
I think for me, like, I love educating people about wellness, and that could be physical wellness, sleep strategies, eating for longevity. It could be emotional wellness, depression, anxiety, burnout, and it could be more organizational. How is the office culture? How is leadership? How is it going with communication with you and your colleagues? So I really think it's important, and I'm a coach too, as you know. So whenever I'm coaching, I'm always looking at all of those aspects. What's
Right.
going on with my client's environment? How is his or her support network? How is his office environment? How is his family life? What's he doing physically? And what's happening, from an emotional standpoint. So I think just looking at all those aspects of wellness is really important to me.
And how do you communicate that to someone who hasn't heard of you? Because it's a pretty broad spectrum of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, usually when I'm talking to people about my webinars, I always mention the fact that, master's in social work, psychology background is mental health, but also health coach for 20 plus years. So health and wellness is really important to me. And I've been working for 5 plus years in organizational, culture. And so I just kind of talk about the fact that I have like experience kind of in those 3 areas,
Yeah.
which has been great because I think that there's a lot of interest in my work because I do cover kind of a wide range of areas.
Yeah, and I guess from an organizational standpoint, that makes sense, right? Because you're sort
Yeah,
of dealing with a
yeah,
broad
it
range of
does.
isn't
And
one
and
size
th
fits all. Yeah,
yeah, and the thing that I think is really interesting that, like, I kind of knew, but I didn't really quite quite really grasp or think about at length until fairly recently, and that, you know, they're all fairly related, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So, if you have someone who, say, is really struggling with depression and anxiety, so that person probably is just not sleeping well, right?
right.
That person maybe is having a hard time at work, problem with communication, problem with burnout, just not being able to function. So all of these like kind of topics that I talk about, they often are overlapping. So if I'm doing a talk on burnout, I'll often end up also talking about resilience and mindset shifts and stress management. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many topics that I have that kind of overlap and are intertwined, which is really interesting.
Yeah. So, and you have a master, you have an MBA and a master's in social work, right? So you've sort of got these two sides of your brain. So I'm
Yes.
curious, do they ever argue with each other? And if they do, who wins?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah, it was a very interesting experience to go get my master's in social work and my MBA. It was a 3-year program. So first year social work, second year MBA, third years both. So, I can't really say they argue with each other in that, one thing I tell companies, and I think companies are realizing, is that, when employees are healthier in body and mind, they're not stressed out, they're not overworked, they're not eating properly, they're healthy in body and mind. Studies have proven they're actually more productive.
Yeah.
Also, they're less apt to actually leave the company. So, there's less chance for having to train new employees and hire new employees. They'll stay longer, attrition goes down, and they're happier. They're just more productive, they're happier. So, there's a huge business case for what I do.
Yeah, I get, and I agree with you 110%, but I'm still amazed at the number of companies that don't understand because the cost of attrition to of churn is far higher than retaining employees, right? And like you
Yes.
said, if they're happy, they actually work harder. So I
Yes,
mean,
exactly.
you're being rewarded,
Exactly.
yeah, with
Right. It's so
longer
true.
tenure and more productivity. So it feels
It's
like a
so true.
no-brainer, and yet so many companies resist sort of
Yeah,
organizational
yeah,
training and wellness, initiatives,
yeah.
or
I
do it
know.
on a checklist way. So
I'm hoping there'll be a shift. I mean, I do think there has been a shift in the direction of trying to support employees more, which is fantastic, of course, for what I do,
yeah,
right? So ever since the pandemic hit, the virtual platform, the Zoom platform is obviously huge, 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 huge. And I am finding that more and more companies are looking to educate their workforce in any of those areas I just described, be it burnout, be it even menopause issues. I just talked to a law firm about menopause. Like there's so many companies that are recognizing the importance of educating their workforce. They want to keep their employees happy.
yeah,
And when
yeah,
I do webinars, sometimes I have 300 people on the call. And these are people that are busy, but they're taking a break in their day because they want to learn something new. And it's great. I'm always so happy when I see those kind of numbers because I say to them, usually start with "Thank you for joining me. I know you're super busy over there,
yeah.
but I appreciate you joining."
I'm just curious though, in your recent engagements, has AI stress become a factor now with employees?
Mm.
Or
AI stress. Yeah, you know what? I honestly think it's a factor for everybody. I
yeah,
think everyone is a little bit nervous of AI, regardless of what you're doing. I just went to a presentation, a really interesting talk by chief of cardiology at a large hospital near where I live, where I do presentations at. And the presentation from him was on how AI is changing medicine.
yeah,
And because at first I thought, oh, AI won't impact medicine, doctors, nurses. but it actually is not true because it is impacting even medicine. So I think everyone gets a little bit, butterflies in their stomach when they think about what's happening with AI and what's going to happen and robots and what's happening with our world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody really has the answer, right? And that's also a fact. So we don't really know how it's going to turn out. So
Yeah, we really don't.
I want to touch on another issue with something that a lot of solopreneurs struggle with, right? The name versus the person. So do people hire WorkWell Webinars or do they hire Cynthia? And does the difference matter?
That is such a great question, and it's so relevant that you asked me that because I'm actually in the process of rebranding my website, and it should be done, I'm hoping next week. It's been a lot of iterations, but I wanted it to really be how I wanted it. So, the website before was focused more on, like you said, on me, on Cynthia. And I really tweaked it more to focus more on WorkWell webinars. So I do focus a bit on my background, my coaching, my experience, but I did gear the website a little bit more to focus on the actual business. I think that's a tricky one. I think that's kind of like it's difficult to know how much to focus on me
Yeah.
or on the actual business when you're trying to do the branding.
So tell me why you made that shift though. Was it a signal you got from customers or what led you to tilt in the favor of WorkWell?
Well, I did get it actually from one customer. He did recommend that I tweak it more to be less about focus on me and more on WorkWell.
Yeah.
So that really is what encouraged me to do that because I think if I didn't get that feedback, I probably wouldn't have thought about it that much. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
So I'm glad. I think it was good feedback. I really do.
And I'm guessing that applies more to the organizational side, right, than the coaching side, because that's
Oh yes, definitely. I
right,
focused a lot more on the organization
sure.
and coaching now.
Than coaching, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing you mentioned to me was that companies sometimes don't want to listen, right? I think this is the word you used, or they misunderstand what you're offering until they're actually in the room. So what do people most often misunderstand about your work or the wellness industry in general, right up to when they sort of experience the session firsthand?
Mm, I think, some industries maybe feel this is not important. Like maybe the employees just don't need that information. They're just too busy. They won't really want it. So I think there's that misconception. But having said that, I do think that companies are looking more and more to use, someone like myself to do webinars. You know, I think for me, my biggest competition is a lot of companies already have in-house people doing what I do.
Yeah.
So that can be really tricky. And so when that's the case, what I'll say is I'll talk about the fact that, I'm bringing, new content. Sometimes it's nice to have someone from outside the company. But I would say that's probably my biggest challenge when dealing with large organizations.
Is that they have somebody in-house who's supposed to be
Exactly.
taking care of wellness, you mean? Oh, I see. Okay. So
Yes. Yep.
and do you work collaboratively with them, or how do you said you bring in new content, but
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I will do some collaboration, but not too often. It doesn't
yeah.
happen too frequently, but I have done a little bit of that, and maybe that's something I should think about doing more of, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I'm happy to hear companies have that, but I'm not sure. And in full disclosure, I know some that just do it on a very superficial level, right? It's almost
Mhm.
like here's the program, and you can, and it's left up to the employees to sort of, take advantage of it or not, which is a very different way
Exactly.
of imparting it than actually, educating someone in sort of like almost
Right.
like a classroom setting. So I'm not sure
Yes.
how effective those are.
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes they have, like, recordings, and they just tell the employees
Right.
to just leave them. Yeah, right, exactly. Whereas, and I think sometimes they don't realize that I'm live, and
Yeah.
that's something that I'm really trying to make sure I communicate. I'm live. This is a live Zoom recording, which I
Yeah.
think people really like.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. They arrive, they show up in a different way than when you're watching a recording, right? And I
Yes,
almost feel like your mindset is different. I'd watch a
I think
recording
so.
when I have some time, whereas for a live thing, I've actually made time, right? So
Exactly.
it's a
I
fundamental
agree.
different way I arrive. Yeah,
Yes, I know that's an interesting way to describe it. I like that. It's true. I can see that.
yeah. So you're 3 years in now. If you could go back and change one thing about how you introduced WorkWell webinars to the world in the beginning, what would it be?
That's a really good question. Um, I think maybe I could have been a little clearer in my messaging, meaning even like something as simple as the fact that this is a live webinar.
Right.
I actually never really promoted it that way until recently when someone asked me, "Oh, is this a live webinar?" I said, "Oh my gosh, wait, maybe people don't realize these are live webinars, you know?" So I think making sure the messaging is very, very clear, so that's probably the one thing that I would do differently. Just really think about what's my message. And sometimes I think it can be very easy to overwhelm the other person
Yeah.
who is getting your email or getting your phone call. And I think making sure the messaging is very clear. Like one thing I would do a lot in the beginning was, send like my one sheet of all my webinars and send my bio and send everything. And I think it might have been overwhelming, and I think sometimes it can be helpful to first, have that Zoom conversation. Usually what I do is I ask for a 15-minute phone call or 15-minute Zoom. I prefer Zoom because you like to see the other person. So a 15-minute Zoom or phone and just spend that time just kind of talking. Again, not too much about myself, more to hear about the other person, what's happening at their business. How can I help them?
Yeah.
I'm definitely a connector. Like I'm really good at like connecting people to other people, helping other people in whatever way I can. And I think that's just been a really effective strategy for me versus maybe sending all my material and hoping they're going to respond. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, no, and I think you make a great point. And I think there's a valuable lesson there, right? Because the less choice you put on in the minds of your customer, the better, the lower the bar in terms of or friction,
No
as we call it,
question.
right?
No
Because
question.
it's hard
It's
for
so
them to
true.
choose. They're not even sure what the problem is, right? So I think you're absolutely right.
Exactly. It's
It's
so
like,
true. And, the other thing too is, and I'm sure you would agree with this, like, relationships take time, right?
yeah,
Like, it takes time to build these relationships. And there's people I've been talking with for several years, hoping they would ask me to do a webinar for their big company or hoping they would ask me to collaborate, whatever it was. And I'm just finding that things are kind of coming to fruition. You know what I'm saying? Because I've developed these relationships. Like it's no longer just like, "Wait, who is this person who's emailing me?" It's more, "Okay, we've had several Zoom calls. We've met in person a few times. Oh, and actually, wait, we did talk about 4 times the past couple of months." You know what I'm saying? So, like, I think I've spent a long time trying to cultivate a lot of relationships. Same way I go on LinkedIn, making sure I'm noticing the posts of the person that I'm interested in, making
right.
sure I'm responding if they send a post that says ask the question and asking for responses, you know what I'm saying? So really trying to support other people and then seeing it come back to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually might have jumped my question because that's,
Shoot,
but
I keep doing that.
that's great though. It's a good thing. It means our conversation's headed the right way. So you're a firm believer, and I want to touch on this networking thing, and you can tell me if there's more we can extrapolate. But you you talk about networking. You mentioned a couple of times now as being sort of key, and you always start the conversation. I remember you telling me by asking, "How can I help you?" Right?
Yes.
Now, for a solopreneur who's sort of introverted and feels icky about networking, can you walk us through what you do, what you say, sort of what you listen for, and then what happens next? So it feels
Yeah.
like a win-win rather than a sales pitch, because I think there's a lot of value there for people listening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do networking in person, a lot of in-person networking, and then also virtually, like over Zoom.
Okay.
So those can be very different in a sense. I kind of think when I'm in person, I might be a little more casual, meaning like, I do try to get a business card. I think it's really important because what I've found, if I don't have that card, and it could be electronic, that's fine, whatever it is, or at least the name so I can find them later on LinkedIn. But it's so easy not to follow up with networking. It's so easy to go to a networking event, you go home and you say, "Who did I just meet?" So I never like to do that. Like I want to make sure I actually am able to follow up. I always try to follow up. I try to follow up right away, like the next day, definitely, if not that night. And, just a quick message. It was so great to meet you, Susan. Would love to talk again. I love the fact that you do X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. Just try and follow up and really try and remember what it is that we talked about And I think talking about some kind of light, fun things is really helpful too. I think a lot of times people become very stressed out at networking events and very serious. And sometimes I'm like, oh, have you been here before? Or what do you have planned for the weekend? Or, oh my gosh, can you believe the snow? Are you from around here? Just trying to ask kind of casual questions and get to know the other person is really a helpful strategy with networking.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable. And again, you said something which is, I think people, there's a mindset shift there because most people go in with a pitch ready,
Oh,
ready
yeah,
to sort of, they're going to go and they're going to sell. But
exactly.
what you just described is you've gone to break the ice and start building a relationship. So it's almost like,
Exactly.
you're making a friend, not a
Yeah.
business contact, right? I
Yeah.
mean, on a
Yeah. You
professional
sell
level.
later. You
Yeah,
sell later.
yeah, absolutely. Or you just share value, right? I mean, that's the other thing you can do, like you said. And I mean,
Exactly.
I
Or
love
you
your
you you find ways to refer, like, "Oh, wow, okay, you're in the landscape business. So is my cousin. Why don't I give you his card? You guys can talk. Maybe you guys can help each other out or whatever." Just finding ways you can support the other person. And then eventually, I have found it inevitably ends up being a positive relationship. I'm
yeah,
in a networking, it's a referral group. So we meet every other Tuesday. And, there's about 25 of us, and the goal is really to get business for others in the group, and it's fairly structured. We're asked, to meet with certain people at, a certain amount of time, and it is pretty structured, a lot like BNI. But, that's what I've learned a lot is, sometimes, I'm talking to someone. I had one of my meetings today was with someone, she's an accountant, and that's not in my area. Like, it's just kind of like, "Oh gosh, what do I do with this?" But, after talking with her, the more I talked with her, the more I realized that it's a situation where I can support her. I can get her some work. I have to be creative sometimes to think about it, you know what I'm saying? But I think it's just a matter of really listening, and one thing I like to do too, either at the beginning or the end of the Zoom call is I'll just ask the person for let's say, "You know what? We have 5 minutes. I'd love to just hear a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you like to do for fun? Like, tell me more about you." And I think that's just kind of a nice way to end because it helps me to better understand what that person's all about. And then that might be a way for me to continue to help out. Like, "Oh, wow, this person's a huge runner. Love to connect her to my neighbor who is a marathon runner." You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So, like, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip too, because again, it's not quid pro quo, right? You're not, and also I imagine people come to networking events with a little bit of a shield because they're expecting to be pitched, right? So when you
Yes,
say,
no
tell me
question.
what your hobby is, suddenly it's like, wait a minute, that's not, you're not selling me anything here. You're actually wanting to
Exactly, exactly.
understand the
I mean,
human. Yeah,
yeah, if you give them your business card, hopefully they won't throw it away, but they'll find out what you do, They'll
yeah,
find out what you do, and
yeah,
then you can find them on LinkedIn, which is key, of course. And I
sure.
love seeing who's connected to who. It's always great if there's, 10 people you're connected with, and you say, "Oh, you know what? My neighbor is X, Y, and Z," and then it's just nice to be able to have that connection too.
Yeah, that is great. And I think we got connected that way too, right? It was
I
through
think so. It was definitely LinkedIn.
Rich connected us, I think.
Maybe. I
Yeah.
can't remember. Sometimes it gets blurry, but that sounds right.
Yeah. So you've built partnerships with large companies, large organizations that essentially feed your work, right? So for a solopreneur who's sort of listening, who's tired of the one and done client hustle, can you talk about your strategy of partnership? So how do you
Yeah.
turn one yes into an ongoing stream of webinars versus a single booking?
Yeah. Well, getting connected with large companies has been great for my business. Like that's helped me tremendously. No question. But that was something that I did spend some time on in terms of researching what organizations are organizations that will help me do that. So I did a lot of research on that. And then in doing that research, I would try and determine what other companies are like that company, right? So it
Right.
just kind of snowballed from there. So that was really helpful. And then because I did a lot of work these past couple of years, a lot of webinars, a lot of presentations. So because of that, I made sure to make sure that I presented that on LinkedIn. Like I would put something on LinkedIn, like I just did a webinar on X, Y, and Z. And so I made a point to get the word out about myself, in other words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have to do self-promotion, and a lot of people, I think, struggle with self-promotion. Um, I don't. And what I mean by that is if I don't promote myself, no one else is, you know? So I make a point to make sure people understand that I'm out there. I'm
Yeah.
doing things. Like, I don't feel like I don't want to share what I'm up to. If I do something really big, like I spoke for the American Heart Association, for instance, I put that out on LinkedIn. Like, why
True.
not? You
Yeah.
know, I spoke for the American Picture Association. Like, why not put that on LinkedIn? So I think it's important to really not feel awkward about promoting yourself. A lot of people do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Most people do. And also, social media doesn't make that any easier because it feels very much like a self aggrandizement platform, right? Most of the time. But I think you made an
Yes,
important distinction, though. To me, it's not, hey, here I am, hire me. It's here's the value I bring by demonstrating things you've done or content you have, right? There's a
exactly.
clear line there. It's not like saying, hey, I'm Nikhil and I'm great, I'm brilliant, come
Yeah,
hire
yeah,
me.
definitely. Definitely. I mean, it does help that I got my MBA in marketing. I think that helps me.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of people that just don't have that kind of marketing savvy, especially people that are in the health and wellness field, I find. I hate to stereotype, but there's a lot of health and wellness coaches that don't feel comfortable promoting themselves, and they will ask me to promote them. And I've actually done that for a couple people. I've kind of helped them, supported them, gave them advice on how to build their brand.
Yeah.
So that's been good.
Yeah, no, you just don't put me out of business, Cynthia.
No,
I hope
I
people
don't think you have to worry about that.
I'm kidding. So you're clearly adept at building webinars, right? You talked about that are engaging clearly because people up, you have a long client list. So I'm curious, is there a webinar or topic you almost didn't build? So one that sort of surprised you by how much it landed, even though you didn't think it was going to be good. And can you sort of walk us through the idea to the moment in the room when you saw it working?
Hmm. Yeah. I think for me, the topic that's been the most surprise has probably been menopause. You know, I developed two webinars, one menopause in the mind and the other lifestyle strategies for managing menopause. And I've been really fascinated by how many companies are interested in that topic. And
Yeah.
I think it's just become kind of a hot topic. It used to
Hmm.
be more taboo to talk about menopause, and
Yes.
the past couple of years, and we're still behind other countries because I have a friend who's a menopause coach in Australia, another one in England, and they tell me that we're way behind them. So I think we still have a lot of work to do in that space in terms of just kind of employers recognizing how difficult menopause can be for many women and just the repercussions of menopause, both physically and emotionally. But I've been really kind of fascinated by that because, as you know, what I do oftentimes is I will send kind of a list of all my webinars, as like my product listing. And menopause is one of my most requested topics.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. It
It
really
is.
is.
And
Followed
especially
by burnout is big too, but that doesn't really surprise me because I think
no.
that many Americans have expressed burnout. We hear about that a lot.
Yeah, and there's not much as much of a taboo with burnout, right? At least that sort of went away a long time ago. But you're right. There
Exactly.
are a lot more women talking about menopause. I've had half a dozen on my podcast who talk about it specifically.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
yeah,
That's
but
great.
I'm glad to hear corporations are sort of more open now to discussing it. So
Yes, it is
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is you live and breathe burnout and work life balance, right? So you literally teach it how not to, right? But you're also clearly someone who works very hard and you're in a lot of places at once. You do a lot of live networking. So what's your actual system for not becoming the cautionary tale? Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about your non-negotiables and also what you do if you catch yourself slipping?
That's great questions. I think I learned a lot from my music business that I owned. I think I got burned out. I did way too much. I did not practice what I was preaching at all.
Yeah.
I worked too much. I got burned out. And when the pandemic hit, it was almost like I was so burned out, I just didn't care anymore. You know what I'm saying? It was like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't do this business. I'm done. So I remind myself of that on days when I feel like I'm doing too much, meaning there's too many back-to-back meetings, one Zoom after another. Because, I find that after I've had a Zoom call, like, I need some time to process what we just discussed.
Yeah.
I need to write that follow-up email. I have to kind of jot down the notes again so I'm clear what we just did. And if I have too many things back to back, then it's like it just gets to be too much. And so I try not to schedule too many things on one day. Now, believe me, I'm not always the best at that. Some days I am doing too much, and I do recognize that. But I'm trying as much as I can to kind of practice what I preach. I also know that I'm most effective first thing in the morning.
Right.
So, like, the first, like, 2 to 3 hours of my day is my optimal time. So that's my time of deep work. Like, that's when I'm really trying to think about what I wanna do. Maybe I wanna develop another webinar. Maybe I wanna take some more time developing a new skill. Maybe I wanna work my website, whatever it is. But it's time for me to really have, ideally, no interruptions and that deep work. And I try to schedule my one-on-ones a little bit later in the day when I'm not in need of having such, kind of clear, concise time, and my mind is a little bit maybe less sharp than it is first thing in the morning. So I'm very aware of that. And I'm also very aware of the importance of taking breaks. I like to do exercise, I play guitar, pick up my guitar, go out on a walk, go meet a friend for coffee, whatever it is. I'm more effective if I have taken breaks. I'm amazed by how many people don't take breaks.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, is an advantage to being an entrepreneur because I work on my own. I mean, I am contracted with a couple of companies. So I am sometimes tied to their schedule, but for the most part, I'm working on my own. I'm setting up my own schedule, and I can carve out that time. And I feel very lucky that way. If it's a beautiful day and a friend wants to meet me for lunch or go out on a walk, great. I'm going to try and factor that into my day. So I think that helps me a lot.
Yeah, and I think there's a really important lesson there, right? I mean, I've learned that the hard way too myself, because it's almost like you start out as a solo business owner thinking you got to work 100% of the time, 7 days a week, because you're the only thing keeping the company going. Not realizing that that limits your ability to think clearly. It limits the
Yes,
quality of your output, and also if you burn out, then your business is done. You don't have a
exactly.
team and 100 people that can keep it going, right? But I also
It's
love
so
the way,
true.
yeah. I mean,
It's so true.
and the other thing, I did a test to learn about my circadian rhythm. So I love that you figured out your productive hours, because I never realized that until I did this test, that I was giving away the morning hours. I'm also a morning productivity person.
Okay.
And I never guarded those hours for, I'd do admin or this, that. I never planned for
Right. It's
those
so
hours.
important.
Yeah, it is so
Definitely.
important.
It is. I know, isn't that fascinating? It's
It
it's
is
interesting. It
fascinating.
really is.
And some
It
people are
really is.
afternoon. My wife's, artistic. She's creative, and she works from 9 to 11 p.m. That's when she's like, her brain is
Wow.
active and she's good to go, and she's like in a zone of genius. And I'm like, you can't get me out of bed at that hour to do
No
anything for
way.
love or
Oh,
money.
yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, no way. No
No,
way.
but it's so
No.
different for everyone, right? And I think it's really
It is
important to
so
sort of figure
different.
out.
It's so
Yeah.
different. And it's interesting. That's one thing I talk about with my burnout presentation. The lines have been blurring so much over the years as people are working from home, right? It's so easy to overwork. It's so easy on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock to just check your emails, maybe work on that presentation a little longer. And it's so easy to do that. But I think trying to make a conscious effort and say, you know what? This has been a long day. I've done enough. I think I need to just close the computer now and tomorrow's another day. I think that's super helpful. And I think, studies have proven we all sleep better when we do that too. It's not an ideal situation to be trying to do work, a couple hours before bed because your mind is trying to unwind. And ideally, you want to just close that computer.
True. And another lesson I learned, thanks to a friend of mine who mentioned it, was like things that drain you, right? So when I do a workshop, for example, that just takes a lot out of you physically and mentally.
Yes.
So I now take the next day. I don't plan anything on the next day, because I know, it's not that I don't enjoy it. I enjoy it, but I know the
Yeah.
physical drain, mental and physical drain it has on me.
Yes.
So I love that you don't plan those types of things more than sort of once in a day or once in a week, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And it's great that you're so self-aware. I love that. That's so good. And speaking of draining, I don't know about you, but I always find, like, networking to be very draining.
Yeah.
You find
Yeah.
that? Yeah, I find it to be very draining. I love networking because I love meeting new people, and I think it's fun, but I will say I do find it draining. Usually, like, when I'm driving home, I kind of feel wiped out.
Yeah, but and actually, listening is very hard, right? Because you have to be present
Yes,
at a very different level than when you're performing. So I
so true.
makes sense to me, and I'm actually, I don't know about you, but I'm an introvert. So some of these things, I have to get into a different sort of mode to do, which I'm fine to do. But now I've started recognizing that I don't do these things back to back to back anymore, right?
Yes, that's so good that, like, you're aware of that and you make conscious effort not to do that. That's so good.
It took
A lot
me
of
a
people
long,
don't.
it took me a long time to get there, but yes, I
Yeah,
did
that's
finally get
great,
there.
though. That's great. You're really self-aware. That's so good.
I'm getting there. I wouldn't say I'm on. I think
Yeah,
it's a
that's good.
continuous journey. And then you also have like two steps back sometimes, like you said, right?
Right,
There
right.
inevitably
Oh, I know.
there will be
It's
weeks
so
when you're
true.
like, oh my God, what did I just do to my calendar? Why did I do
Ah,
that to myself?
I know. Why did I book all this?
Yeah.
I know. I hear you. I hear you.
So, but you're
But
right.
don't you find too, like one reason why try to accomplish like the hardest tasks first thing in the morning is because you feel so much more productive that way and it just sets the day up in a positive way, right? I'm sure you find the same thing.
I agree. I've always loved doing the hardest things first. Because I
Yes,
always
it's so
feel like
great.
then it's like I'm sliding downhill after that, right? Versus the
Yes,
longer you put it off, the harder the trek seems to be when you
no
actually
question.
take it on. So, yeah,
Exactly. It's like you want to move those big rocks, right? And then just deal with the little ones later on. I know, 100%.
yeah. So, no,
Really helps.
that's great. So, if we were to grab coffee 3 years from now, what do you want to have achieved? What's different? What have you built?
Mm. I think I'd like to have maybe a few people kind of working with me. Like to add a couple more people to my group. I think it's always nice to have a team. I've always liked working in teams, just a small group. I'd like to do that. And, I think I'd also like to even broaden my kind of my content, let's just say. I wanna broaden my content a little more even and deepen it. I think, from my perspective, it's a little tricky because you can always do more, right? You can
Yeah.
always learn more. I can always learn more about emotional eating. I could always take another course in, you know, resilience, whatever it is. So I have to be careful about trying to do too much, but I wanna make sure I'm continually cutting edge and adding new content because that's really important. I have to do that, so I have to stay on top of a lot of things, and I have to make sure I'm educating to the extent that I wanna be educating people about these topics.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you're right. I mean, I always say outsource, outsource, outsource. The moment you're in a position to, you don't have to have full time employees, but there are lots of part time contractors, everything you can add to.
Definitely.
Solo doesn't mean alone, right? That's the one thing I always
Exactly.
tell people. So,
Exactly, and then it allows you time to do the things that you wanna be doing.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
doing that with my website right now. My website's completely outsourced, and I'm so glad because that's not what I wanna be doing.
no.
So let someone else do it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to make sure that they have persistence. I mean, so many small businesses fail because people are just discouraged. They feel they're not getting the sales they want. They're just not happy with how things are moving forward. But I would say persistence is so important and perseverance and just really trying to keep pushing forward and trying to, determine, well, maybe I want to tweak this. Maybe I should do this a little differently and, being aware of changing and kind of evolving as you move forward,
Yeah,
changing
no, I
things up
love
a
that.
little.
Yeah, absolutely. Change is the one constant on this journey, right? So
It
you
really is.
embrace
I'm
it
sure
and
you
don't fight
found
it.
that with what you do, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I started this 2 years ago, it was a completely, I mean, obviously it's still, I'm not like, designing jeans now. So I'm not talking about shifts like that, but it has absolutely evolved. And the way I look at it is it's all market research, right? Like you mentioned, a customer giving you some feedback. That's what I incorporate in my evolution, right? It's not
Yes.
me. sitting and going on a whiteboard and deciding to change things. It's talking to people, learning from clients, getting feedback, soliciting feedback. That helps me
Yes.
sharpen my offering, deepen it or widen it depending on what the market is telling me it needs.
Mhm. Definitely. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, really keeping your eyes open, and seeing what's around you, maybe seeing what the competition's doing too, like being aware of what else is going on around you, I think is really important. I think it's easy to kinda have your head in the sand when you're trying to start your own business and get really worked up with just what you're trying to do, but I think being aware of what's going on around you in the industry is super important.
Yeah, and to your point, having the space to do that, right? That's really important because
Yes.
you could end up working in your business rather than on your business. That's the other lesson I learned.
Yes. Definitely.
And you need that
No
lens,
question.
yeah, to evolve.
Yes, exactly. I think it's important also to surround yourself with other entrepreneurs. I found that to be really helpful. I don't know if you find that too. If you
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Find your
it's helpful.
tribe. I always say find your tribe, right?
Yes, it is really helpful
Yeah.
because it's a completely different experience being an entrepreneur.
It is. It is. And being a solopreneur even more, I would say, right? Because
Yes,
you're not getting capital, you're not building a startup, you're not becoming a unicorn. So there's a very
exactly.
different mindset there in terms of I always say you're building
Exactly.
your business
Exactly.
around your life, not the other way around, right?
It's so true.
So
I think if you really love what you're doing and you really believe in your brand, sometimes it doesn't even feel like work. And I'm sure you feel the same way. Like,
oh,
I love what I do. I believe in what I do. And it doesn't feel like work, and that's really exciting. And I bet you feel the same way.
absolutely. Case in point right now. I'm loving having this conversation and this is work, but I don't think of it as work even. So yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know. It's really exciting. I think that's one of the amazing kind of gifts about entrepreneurship.
Yes, true. Well, and the flip side is make sure that it's not draining you and you're not resenting what you're doing, right? Because
Oh, no
then
question.
you're on the wrong path. So,
Definitely. No question.
so is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, Cynthia, that we haven't covered?
Geez, I think we've covered a lot. I don't know if anyone wants to find me, please look for me, workwellwebinars.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, I absolutely love your podcast. I love listening to your episodes, such a wide variety of topics. I know you just did one on overcoming anxiety that was super interesting, and I just really like the topics that you have, and I'll continue to listen for sure.
Thank you. No, and we'll add a link in the show notes for people to know how to contact you and reach out to you. So, all right. Well,
Fantastic.
that brings us to our rapid fire round. So, 5 fun questions, and just tell us what comes to mind. So, a country song that secretly describes your solopreneur journey.
Oh my gosh, what a question. How about cruise?
Oh, how about cruise? Yeah, okay. That's one wellness myth you're genuinely tired of nodding politely at.
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah, I I agree. That's not a good thing. Um, what is the best boring habit that actually keeps you from becoming the cautionary tale you warn clients about?
I'm definitely a planner, and I would say 6 days out of 7 when I get up, one of the first things I do is I create a to-do list. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
kind of a boring habit, and it makes me seem like I'm very kind of type A, which I might be, but, but yeah, I would say my to-do list. I'm a little
Okay.
bit,
Yeah.
attached to that to-do list.
Well, it's a good tool.
Yeah.
If your son calls you from BC sophomore year and says, "Mom, I'm dropping out to start my own company," what's your first word?
Oh, wow. Good luck.
Well, if he listens, then it's on the record now. But I love that. If if Burnout had a spokesperson, what would its sales pitch sound like, and how would you rebut it?
Burnout can creep up on you for sure. So it's super important to really recognize the signs of burnout. Oftentimes people don't really understand what are symptoms of burnout. Even something like arguments with coworkers or their spouse or even their kids. Just be aware when you're noticing that maybe you're not acting the way you used to act, you're kind of behaving differently. That can be a sign of burnout.
Okay. So last question, what's the funniest thing someone said in a corporate webinar chat?
Oh, I was doing a talk on mindset shifts and, thinking of the positive, and someone said to me, "Are you happy every single day of your life?" And I said, "Honestly, no, I can assure you, no, I'm not always happy." But
Yeah,
it was just kind of funny that
that is funny. And
that comment went in the chat.
well, that's a great note and a happy note to end our show on. So thanks, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for this wonderful conversation and for all the insight and wisdom you shared today.
Thank you so much. It was so great. I really appreciate your time.
There's some real gold in here for solopreneurs, especially if you're on the early stages or feel like you're spinning your wheels. Here are my takeaways for your own journey. First, side hustles are research, not just extra cash. Cynthia ran side hustles, music PR, coaching, while still in corporate, not just as a release valve, but to test drive what it actually felt like to run something on her own. When COVID hit and live shows disappeared, she closed that door. But she didn't walk away empty handed. She walked away knowing more about what she wanted to build next and how she wanted to build it. If you're still in that tug of war phase, use the time wisely. Don't just ask, can I make money at this? Ask, do I actually want to run this business every day? Because the how matters as much as the what. That's the kind of data Cynthia collected, and it's what made her leap feel solid. Second, messaging clarity and how hard it is to read the label when you're inside the bottle. Cynthia said that for a long time, she never explicitly told people her webinars were live. She just assumed people understood that. And it wasn't until a client asked her, point blank, that she realized people might be filtering her out before they even responded because they assumed they were buying a recording. I see this all the time with solopreneurs. You're so close to your own offer that you forget what someone sees from the outside can be totally different from what you think they're seeing. So go back to your core offer and ask, what am I assuming the other person already understands? What's obvious to me that won't be obvious to them? And then make it more explicit, live, real time, customized, whatever the version is for your business. Don't assume they'll infer it. Say it. Third, and this really complements the second point, is that clarity beats volume. Cynthia admitted that early on she'd send a one-sheet listing every single webinar she offered, along with her full bio, basically the whole buffet. In hindsight, she realized that instead of looking impressive, it was just overwhelming. This is a classic solopreneur trap. We think more info creates confidence, but in reality, more info just creates friction. If your prospect has to work to understand how to hire you, they won't. They aren't lazy, they're just busy. Remember, your job as a brand is not to explain every detail of your process. It's to make the very next step obvious. Don't hand them a buffet menu when they're looking for a specific entree. Focus on a single clear promise, a clean outcome, and a simple invitation. When you lower the friction, the revenue part tends to take care of itself. The last one is about networking and the one question that changes everything. Cynthia built her entire business on one question. How can I help you? Not here's what I do, not can I send you my one sheet, not let me tell you about my webinars. She walks into every conversation, in person, on LinkedIn, on Zoom, genuinely asking, what does this person need and how can I connect them to it? That creates trust fast because it disarms the shield everyone else walks in with. What Cynthia is doing is playing a longer game and it's paying off. So if you're someone who feels weird about networking, try this. Don't walk in thinking, who can hire me? Walk in curious. Ask what they're working on, what's stuck, and whether there's someone you can connect them with. Even if there's no immediate business outcome, you've made a deposit in the relationship, and those deposits compound. But I want to be clear, this is not a tactic. You can't fake this. People can feel the difference between someone who's listening to respond and listening to understand. My challenge to you this week is to run your own circadian audit. For the next 3 days, pay attention to when your energy naturally peaks and when it dips. Once you find that peak, the zone of genius window, move your hardest, most important tasks into those hours in your day. Stop giving your best energy to admin work or other people's priorities and start giving it to the deep work that actually moves your business forward. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If this episode made you stop and think about how clearly your message is actually landing, I want to offer you something. It's a free 40-minute brand clarity diagnostic a working session where we work through your messaging live and I show you exactly where the friction is and what it could be costing you. You'll walk away with a personalized scorecard and 2 strategic pivots you can act on right away, whether we ever work together or not. Most people are surprised by what shows up. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind, and remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.